Getting high for cheap in Europe. A report shows more people are using new synthetic drugs, drugs that can make them aggressive and even psychotic. We'll take a closer look at the new trend and whether it's linked to Europe's economic crisis. This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. Well, they're cheap, they're dangerous, and they can have dangerous side effects. We're talking about a new type of drug, and it's being used by more and more people across Europe. That's what emerged from a new European drug report. Amphetamines and ecstasy are still the most common drugs on the market, it says. Ecstasy use is actually on the rise. Stronger pills are attracting more buyers. But there's a worrying new trend, the use of psychoactive substances. They're intended to mimic the effects of illegal drugs. 73 new types of these legal highs were discovered last year. One of those is Sisa. It's known as the cocaine of the poor, and in Greece its use is on the rise. There are fears the country's crippling economic crisis could be making the problem worse. We'll take a closer look at that in a moment, but first, John Sotiropoulos met one user in Athens who's trying to get clean.
It's a family of sorts, drug addicts who are thinking of giving up the habit and giving their lives a second chance. They meet at this clubhouse in central Athens, run by a state-funded therapy center. Among them is Yannis, a 43-year-old metal worker. He has spent years building cars, ships and olive presses under the influence of stimulants. The latest of these was shisha.
I want to be clean, so that I can become independent, so that I can help my child, something I haven't done in 16 years. I wasn't around. Why should she listen to her junkie dad? Even if what I said was right, she wouldn't have the respect.
Drug experts say shisha has spread rapidly over 3 years because it's unlike traditional drugs. This brothel-lined street in the heart of Athens is the capital of the shisha trade right now. Shisha is a crisis drug, a powerful stimulant selling for just $3 a dose. It keeps users awake for days on end, but it is a dangerous drug. It can cause heart arrhythmia and strokes, and it tends to make users aggressive and even psychotic. Shisha arrived in Greece during the crisis and found a vulnerable market.
Shisha is cheap, so it's easy to get a hold of. It's also impossible to control because it's made easily at home. It's readily available on the internet because its separate ingredients are legal, and these are the reasons for its widespread.
Greece's economy provides little hope to young people. 2 out of 3 are unemployed. For many, it's easy to become despondent. Even Yannis' recovery is fragile. The shipyards where he once worked are all but closed, and work elsewhere is scarce. Rehab may be just the first of many difficult steps in fulfilling his dream of being a true father. John Sotiropoulos for Inside Story, Athens.
Well, joining me now to discuss this then from Athens, Eleni Marini. She's a clinical psychologist and head of the streetwork team at KETHEA, Greece's largest rehabilitation and social integration network. From Lisbon, Frank Zobal, an editor of the European Drug Report that we mentioned earlier, and also from Athens, Dimitri Sotiropoulos. He is a political science professor and researcher on the social effects of austerity. Good to have you all with us. Frank Zobal, I might as well start with you then, since you're one of the authors of this European Drug Report, which is the focus of our discussion. What are the main points then that you think people should take away from it?
So the report we released today shows a rather positive picture of the European drug situation, especially what regards the old drugs, that is cannabis, cocaine, amphetamine and ecstasy, where we see a stable to declining situation, although sometimes still at historically high levels. A very positive development we see now for a couple of years is the decline in the heroin problems in Europe. And you might know that over the last 30 years, heroin has been at the core of Europe's drug problem, causing most of the deaths and most of the diseases, drug-related harms here in Europe. That's the positive part. The less positive part is that we see many new substances appearing, We see some changes in the market with, for instance, methamphetamine appearing in different places in Europe. We had new HIV outbreaks in a few countries. One of them was Greece, and a few other developments. So a background picture that is rather positive, but small developments that are worrying in different ways.
Dimitri Sotiropoulos, if I can turn to you on this, how does the main points of this report compare with what you see, particularly in Greece, and what you believe are the social effects of the continued austerity program there?
We are basically confronting a situation which is similar to the Great Depression in the United States in the 1930s, or if you wish, the very large economic transformations in Eastern Europe after the collapse of state socialism. Such large-scale economic transformations, unfortunately, have very negative social effects. So we have a rise in poverty, and in addition to that, a dramatic rise in unemployment, and particularly in youth unemployment. And this is related to problems in public health, as in order to prevent the further decline of the economy, the government has decreased public spending in health.
Frank Zobal, if I could turn back to you then, do you see a causal link there? The idea that because of these continued austerity cuts, cuts in budget programs, social programs and so on, this means less money to fight the drug through enforcement and drug treatment programs, and more people who are unemployed, more people with less money who turn to things like this?
So yeah, there are two questions. The first one is in an economic downturn situation with rising unemployment and youth unemployment, is there's an increase in drug use. We don't have strong data now to answer this question, but we know from the past a few things. One of them is that usually when you have an economic downturn, the people who use drugs for recreational purposes have a tendency to decrease their use. So it has also a protective effect. However, where it is the worst, where it hits the most, is with the marginalized people who get even more marginalized because they have less social benefits, they have less access to little jobs, and then they take more risk when they take drugs, and classically they move to injection and to the injection of the most dangerous drugs. So that's one part of the question. Another part maybe on this issue also is that when you have very high levels of unemployment among young people, you might have some of them, and just some of them, who are turned to the illicit drug trade. And because there's a possibility to make a living. And that's what we have seen in the Americas, in the United States, in some inner city neighborhoods, where the working class, part of the working class, has turned to the drug market. Now on the cuts, on the austerity measures, we don't have very clear data. What we know is that there have been in Europe cuts in the areas where drug policy is, that is health and security. We have some countries reporting us that some services are cut, but it's very difficult to know exactly how much is cut. I give you an example. This morning, the Portuguese drug coordinator, and you know that Portugal is one of the countries that is severely hit by austerity measures, has told us that most of the services could be preserved. That means that the government has still thought that drugs is an important issue and that drug treatment in particular needs to be preserved.
Eleni Marini, as someone who has worked with drug addicts on a daily basis, how does all of this compare with the work that you've done in Athens?
Actually, Sisa is a new drug for the last 2 years in Greece. We had the research in 2010 in about 150 drug users of Sisa, and we had their experience on that. Most of them had tried this drug. This makes them more aggressive with many psychological and health problems. It is a cheap drug. It costs about 2 to 3 euros per dose. It is very easy for them to find it in the street market. And what most of them say is that it creates them many damages. People used to take Sisa and other drugs as well. Most of them are multi-drug users. So it's something that it creates really big damages on their bodies and their minds.
All right, well, we're talking a lot here about synthetic drugs or so-called legal highs. Let's take a closer look at what they are. They're often chemical compounds that imitate the effects of drugs like cannabis, and many of them are made in illegal labs in China. And because they're not regulated, experts worry about unknown dangerous ingredients they may contain. And a lack of regulation means legal highs are often widely available online. Some governments, like the UK, have tried to ban specific kinds of legal highs, but the development of new drugs is continually outpacing the law. Frank Zobal, this is a big problem, isn't it? Because we mentioned at the top of the program there that 73 new substances that provide a high, which was mentioned in your report. Doesn't this make it almost impossible for governments and for the authorities to tackle this problem?
You're right. 73 new substances were identified by the European Early Warning System, which is held jointly by the MCDDA and Europol. That's 50% more than the year before, which was more than the year before. And for the last 5 years, we have seen year-on increases all the time. Now, how to tackle this issue? It's very difficult because the drug laws we had up to now are not really ready for that. What you do usually with the new substances is first you assess its risk, and then if it's dangerous, you put it on a list of controlled substances. Now, given the pace of renewal of these substances, given the fact that the producers have always a new substance behind ready, it becomes very difficult to handle with these instruments this whole bunch of new substances. So this is why some countries in Europe have now developed specific laws to try to control generally all these type of substances. There are 4 countries, Ireland, Austria, Romania and Portugal, who have introduced these laws. Other countries have tried to have temporary bans or to control whole groups of substances like the synthetic cannabinoids or others. So there are different approaches which are now taken by the countries in Europe, and probably in the near future there will be some solutions on how to handle this market. The fact that the substances are sold over the internet makes it, of course, much more complicated, because you order your substances somewhere in the world, you don't know where, and they can then come by mail to your home. So there is probably also new solutions need to be found.
Yeah, Dimitri,
if you allow me, I want to say a word about Sisa, this drug in Greece, if you allow me. So according to the information we have, Sisa is crystal methamphetamine, and this is a substance which has made tremendous problems in the United States and also in other parts of the world. Europe had very little of that up to now, and we have now in recent years more and more reports, not only from Greece, we had also from Germany. I think today it is also in the Irish newspapers that there are cases of the presence of crystal methamphetamine, which is a substance that you smoke and that is associated with very high damages. So it's very worrying what is happening in Athens these days.
Dimitri, Sotiropoulos, the fact that so many of these drugs are so readily available that you can get them online, for instance, you get the impression that the drug makers always seem to be one step ahead of this.
Well, we do not have enough hard data to talk about the expansion of the use of drugs. What we have, however, is knowledge of the spread of diseases among those who are using drugs with intravenous injections. And this is the largest problem of public health we encounter now with regard to drug use in this country. The uncontrollable spread of diseases among the intravenous drug users, and I'm talking about the spread of HIV and hepatitis C among those people in particular. Otherwise, we're not really sure that the problem of diseases has spread to the wider general population.
Well, we talked about the issue of austerity a little bit earlier in the discussion. We'll take a closer look now about how all of this may not be tied into austerity. Research published this month shows that the financial crisis has seriously affected people's health in general. Researchers in Britain and the US recorded more than 10,000 suicides during the recession. As many as 1 million new cases of depression have been diagnosed. That's a 10% rise. In the US, 5 million Americans have lost access to healthcare. And in Britain, 10,000 families have lost their homes. HIV rates in Greece have risen by more than 200% since 2011 because of cuts in funding to prevention programs. And as we've heard, research suggests that rising unemployment could be a factor in increased drug use. So, Eleni Marini, is that something from the work that you've done? Is that something that you believe? Is there a clear link there between what's happened in Greece and the economic situation there and the increased drug use?
Yes, I think that the economical situation have involved a lot of people because drug users are isolated anyway. So in this period, with all those problems, they're hopeless. Many people are lately homeless with severe problems, with no motivation of moving to therapeutic programs. What to try to do, because we approach the people in the street in everyday basis, and we try to help them with the problems they face with the spread of HIV, is to try to motivate them, to try to have some new actions, needle exchange, condom disposal, and we educate them to use their own paraphernalia only once. That's a really big problem. HIV is a big problem for drug users at the moment, and we try to link them with services. We have a cooperation with 7 general hospitals in Athens at the moment, and we motivate them to go and take care of their basic health needs. We accompany them to the hospitals, and we, in cooperation with the doctors, we are in the hospital with them in order to support them. For those who really want to change their life and who start thinking being in a therapeutic unit, we try to link them with those services. Otherwise, what we try to do with them is to try to make them be alive at the first point, and then to make them part of our society, come back again in the society.
All right.
Sisa, yeah.
Dimitri, I just want to turn to get Dimitri's thoughts on this. When we hear of all of these, I mean, despite all of these social problems, which are many, are we overstating some of this? I mean, especially when you hear talk of society being on the brink of collapse. Do we make too much of that?
With regard to social problems, I think the most grave problems are certainly the problems encountered by families in which no adult member works. I'm talking about households where neither of the spouses has a job. And this, unfortunately, pushes these people towards social exclusion, namely to the lack of access to basic social services. On the other hand, I must stress that we do not talk about a total social collapse. This is a society which magnificently and surprisingly has reacted to the crisis in a way that shows that there is still social solidarity. Families, groups of people who help each other, neighbors have sprung up to the challenge, and I really amazed myself at how Greek society, regardless of the very deep cuts in social spending, has tried to sustain itself.
Frank Zobal?
I just wanted to come back maybe on the problem of the HIV infections among injecting drug users. We have in Europe a long-term decline in these HIV infections. And suddenly, 2 years ago, we had 2 big outbreaks. One of them was just mentioned in Greece and another one in Romania. And while they have a lot of reasons and they are a bit complicated to explain, there are several issues that they have in common also. And one of them is that there were lack of services in both cases, in Greece and in Romania. Greece has made now serious efforts to improve some of the services or increase some of the services. And there was also a move among the problematic drug users, heroin injectors, to injecting or using other drugs, namely stimulants, which are drugs that you tend to inject or use more often and which tend to make your behaviors more erratic or more complicated. So there was a general increase of risk behaviors, and that might well be a bit the story of the future we will see in Europe, is that with the background of an improving situation, we will have outbreaks in different parts of Europe that come from a particular situation, not too many services, a move towards cheaper drugs, but that have strong effects on your health, and that increase the risk behaviors and thereby allow this type of HIV outbreaks or hepatitis C outbreaks.
Let's take a look then at some of the reaction we've been getting on this on our Facebook page. Ben Broders tells us maybe it's time to invest money in creating a stable society that avoids crushing poverty and delivers a stable future for people. Drug use will never end, but the reasons people start using drugs can be reduced. Christopher Stern says there is absolutely no question that there is a link. Check out the kinds of illegal drugs that are being used in some of the most destitute parts of the US. And Brian Ortez says, if anyone thinks that being poor and living off drugs doesn't make any sense, I have witnessed that often cheap drugs like this shisha/meth can be consumed instead of food. Some people may criticize a homeless man for spending $5 on a fifth of liquor, but that alcohol will kill the cramp in his stomach from hunger. I want to put that last point then to you, Eleni Marini, as someone who's worked with drug addicts regularly. Is that a valid point there? I mean, people often question why drug users continue to pay to use these drugs when they're also hungry. But is there a link there where the drug use actually helps the hunger?
Yeah, actually, drug users pay all their money for their dose. That's the most important thing for them. They don't keep money for food or by covering other needs. What we try to make with them is to link them with services where they can go have their food, have shower, take clothes, clean clothes, and have other services for their health issues. All the money they've got, they spend it for their drug use. Many of them are involved with legal problems. Many women, drug users, are obliged to do prostitution in order to earn their money, and basically that's a circle. They are doing prostitution in order to earn their money for their dose, and basically they need to take drugs in order to do prostitution. So that's a picture of the situation outside. I don't know if that was your question.
Yep, that's fine. Dimitri Sotiropoulos, the fact that so many of these synthetic drugs are surprisingly cheap is also a factor in their use, isn't it?
Yes, this has unfortunately fueled the further use of drugs. And we're talking about drugs which, as my colleagues explained, can be very harmful both to the body and the soul of the users. On the other hand, the Greek state unfortunately has not sustained a stable policy to fight the distribution of drugs by the drug dealers. There is a problem then with not only drug use, which is fueled by the economic crisis, but also with the incapacity of police forces to balance the spread of drugs in a country which, as you know, is located in a neighborhood, the Eastern Mediterranean, which serves as a transit point for the distribution of drugs in Europe.
Well, that just about does it then. We are out of time, but I want to thank all three of our guests, Eleni Marini, Frank Zobal, and Dimitri Sotiropoulos. Thanks very much for your time. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Hazem Sika. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.